Am I a Pharisee? Part 9. Hi, welcome to today's little lesson. This is part 9 of a series of lessons. I never thought it would go this long, but I feel like it's been good for us. It's been good for me. In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus' detailed denunciations of the scribes and Pharisees, and we're looking for any application in our own lives, and we're finding it, okay? Currently, we're a little more than halfway through this chapter, and I'm just going to pick up where we left off in our last little lesson, if that's okay, where Jesus was, criticizing the Pharisees and scribes because of their misplaced values. They valued the gold of the temple more than the temple itself, which was the habitation of God to a degree under the old covenant. And so we're asking ourselves that same question. Is it possible that I could be misvaluing things on the scale of the real value in God's eyes? Am I taking things that are of little value and making them of great value and importance, or vice versa? And we're going to see that's the spirit of what Christ is talking about here. Okay, so now we go by verse, well, let's just repeat a little bit here. Verse number 20 of chapter 23 of Matthew. Therefore, whoever swears by the altar, Jesus is correcting them, swears both by the altar and by everything on it. Whoever swears by the temple, swears both by the temple and by him who dwells in it. So you're not released from your obligation, your vow, when you swear, by the gold of the temple and not by the temple itself, and so forth. Okay, so now, new territory, verse number 22. Whoever swears by heaven swears both by the throne of God and by him who sits on it. So, when we swear by heaven, if we would, now we're not swearing by heaven. This is a practice of the scribes and Pharisees. We're obligated to keep our vows. And the Pharisees would have said, on this one, I'm sure no as well, because of some technicality. Now, here's the principle that it actually starts a new paragraph in the New American Standard, but I'm not sure it should be a new paragraph. I think it's related to what we have been reading about these misplaced values and misplaced, assigning importance to various things relative to how important they are in God's eyes. Verse 23 of Matthew 23, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, your garden herbs, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. All right, so here's something really important for believers to understand, lest we become Pharisaic to any degree. The Pharisees majored in the minors and minored in the majors. So they're always emphasizing the importance of tithing. And I think there's a lot of churches like that. There, if you took what percentage of the Bible mentions tithing, let's just say it's 0.5%. And then you listen to many church sermons consistently over a period of months or years, what percentage of the time is tithing mentioned? It's much greater than what the Bible mentions it. So they're placing a greater importance upon it. Well, why? Well, because in the church's eyes and many leaders' eyes, it is more important because that's what keeps the machine going. We need your tithes. We need your offerings. But Jesus, the Pharisees were deep into tithing. They were tithing their garden herbs. So they pick a little, mint, and they slice off 1/10 of their little mint leaf, put the rest in their tea, and the other, little thing, they put it in a little cup, and I guess they brought it to the temple to present. I don't know, but that's what they were doing. And Jesus says, okay, that's in the word, but there are things that are much, 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 much more important than tithing. And he lists some of the things. He calls them the weightier, or the more important provisions of the law, and he lists 3 things: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Wow. And of course you could do a study on those 3 things in the Bible, and you'd find a lot about that, because those are attributes of God. He's just. He's also merciful. He's also faithful. And he wants us to imitate him. And so these are the more weighty things. And Jesus didn't throw out the tithing thing. No, he said, but these things you should have done without neglecting the others. So make the most important things the most important things, make the little things, they're all have some degree of importance. And I think that, we could go a million different directions in this. I'm not going to be able to go a million different directions in the few minutes that I have left. But I'll tell you one thing that many of us are guilty of in placing much more importance on them than what God does at the neglect of other things that God says are more important, and that is our pet doctrines. Those things that we hold as, this is what kind of sets me apart from other Christians because I believe this, and I'm always, harping on this, and I'm always posting on Facebook about this. I'm always starting conversations about my favorite doctrine, and it just becomes an obsession, to try to convince others that you're right and they should get on the same doctrinal path as you, and so forth. And what's more important, there are many things more important, but one of the big things is, of course, is unity. Jesus didn't pray in John 17 that our doctrine would be absolutely perfect and that even we'd be unified necessarily in our doctrine, but that we would all be one. And if there's one thing that has divided Christians more than anything else, it's doctrine. I can't fellowship with you because you don't believe like me. I go to the church that has this doctrine, and we even advertise it on the front of our church that we're not like the rest of these other churches because of certain doctrines that we believe and they don't believe, or vice versa. Okay, so that's Pharisaic. You're making the little things the big things, and the big things the little things. And neglecting what is most important, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Doctrine is something that, can actually become an idol. And it is. There's no doubt that doctrine becomes an idol. I hate to go into specifics about that because I'll make people angry about, attacking their doctrine. And there might not be anything wrong with their doctrine, but when it supersedes, when our love of doctrine supersedes our love of God, when all your Christianity is based on knowledge of doctrine rather than obedience to God's commandments because you love him, you see, that's Pharisaic. And to a degree, again, you have to dig a little bit here to see it, but that's the principle that Jesus is communicating here. He, at one time said, I don't know if it's in this passage, but he said, you strain out the gnat and you swallow the camel. That's the same thing. You find a gnat in your soup and you go, oh my goodness, there's this gnat. You're all focused on this little thing. Strain out that gnat. I don't want that gnat in my soup. No, sir. But there, you look down the next day and there's a camel sitting in your bowl of soup. Oh, it's a funny illustration. It's impossible, of course, to swallow a camel, but you get what Jesus is saying. We're unbalanced. What's the most important thing? Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. What's the second most important thing? Love your neighbor as yourself. And what's another really important thing? Make disciples. Okay, out of time for today. Thank you for joining me. Hope to see you next time.